The year was 2347 and humanity had been part of the Galactic Concord for 18 years. They were the newest species to discover faster-than-light travel and joined the great community of spacefaring civilizations. Most alien races did not think much of humans. They were physically average with no special abilities. Their technology was good, but nothing remarkable. They preferred talking over fighting and always seemed eager to make friends rather than enemies. The aliens found humans curious in some ways. They enjoyed human music and found their paintings interesting. Some species collected human art as novelties, but nobody considered humanity a threat or even particularly important. They were just another young species finding their place among the stars on a distant world called Kepler 442b. Humans had built a colony named New Haven. It was a beautiful place with amber-colored fields that stretched to the horizon under twin suns. The planet had no military value and no rare resources. People chose to live there because it was peaceful and safe. Families built homes and planted gardens. Children ran through the fields playing games while their parents worked in agricultural centers. The colony had grown to hold 2.3 million people who wanted nothing more than quiet lives. Far from the busy core worlds, Admiral Catherine Moore was sleeping aboard the carrier Endurance when the distress signal arrived at 347 hours, Terran Standard Time. The communications officer woke her immediately. Something was wrong at New Haven. The message was broken and filled with static. Catherine could hear screaming in the background and explosions that made the transmission shake. A woman's voice was begging for help, saying that ships had appeared in the sky and started bombing everything. The message lasted 47 seconds before it cut to silence. Catherine ordered her fleet to New Haven at maximum speed. The journey took 11 hours and every minute felt like an eternity. She tried to reach the colony through every communication channel but received only static in response. Deep in her gut, she knew something terrible had happened. When the Endurance dropped out of hyperspace above New Haven, Catherine felt her heart stop. The colony was gone. Where cities had once stood, there was only ash and blackened earth. The amber fields were burning. Smoke rose from the surface in great pillars that could be seen from orbit. Scanner teams searched desperately for life signs but found nothing. No survivors. No one hiding in shelters. No children waiting to be rescued. 2.3 million human beings had been erased from existence. The reconnaissance teams that landed on the surface found evidence of what had happened. The attack had come from the Vraxian Dominion, a militant reptilian species that had always viewed humanity with contempt. They had never accepted that mammals deserved a place among the stars. For years they had made threatening speeches and called humans weak and pathetic. Most species ignored them as angry fools making noise, but this was not noise. This was slaughter. The Vraxians had used a new weapon that combined orbital bombardment with ground assault teams. They had not come to conquer New Haven or take its resources. They had come to kill. Every man, woman, and child had been hunted down and eliminated. The Vraxian soldiers had recorded themselves laughing as civilians tried to flee. They had broadcast this footage across 17 star systems with a simple message attached. Know your place, mammals. On Earth, the news arrived like a hammer blow to the soul of humanity. President Daniel Carter was woken in the middle of the night and shown the footage from New Haven. He watched in silence as cities burned and people died. He saw Vraxian commanders joking with each other while ordering another bombing run. He saw children running for their lives only to be cut down by weapons. Fire. When the footage ended, the president sat alone in the darkness. For a long time, the next morning, he addressed the United Nations General Assembly. Representatives from every nation on Earth had gathered to see the evidence and hear their leaders speak. The massive screens in the chamber showed the same footage that had broken the president's heart. The burning colony. The fleeing civilians. The laughter of the killers. Nobody spoke when the footage ended. The silence stretched for 11 minutes as grown men and women wept openly or stared at the screens with expressions of disbelief. Some held hands with colleagues they had argued with for years. In that moment, there were no political divisions. There was only shared grief and growing anger. Secretary of Defense Laura Mitchell walked slowly to the podium. Her face was pale, but her hands were steady as she placed a single folder before the president. The folder was old and worn. Its contents had been classified for over 3 centuries. Every military leader hoped it would never need to be opened. President Carter looked at the folder for a long moment. Then he looked at the assembly. For 18 years, he said quietly, we have smiled at the galaxy. We have negotiated and compromised and shown everyone our poets and philosophers. We have demonstrated our capacity for peace and our desire for friendship. He paused and his jaw tightened. They have mistaken our kindness for weakness. He opened the folder and looked at the documents inside. Plans that had been drawn up when humanity first realized they were not alone in the universe. Contingencies for the day when peace was no longer possible. The president looked up at the assembly with eyes that had grown cold and hard. Activate the Prometheus protocols. Across the solar system, things began to move. On the dark side of Earth's moon, massive doors opened in the surface, revealing shipyards that had operated in secret for decades. Beneath the rust-colored deserts of Mars, factory complexes powered up for the first time in years. In the asteroid belt, research stations that appeared abandoned on every scan suddenly came alive with activity. Humanity had always hoped for peace. They had genuinely wanted to be friends with every species they encountered. But they had never been foolish enough to believe that hope alone would keep them safe. While they smiled and traded and made art that aliens found charming, they had also been preparing, building, waiting. The Vraxians had wanted to see what happened when you pushed humans too far. They had wanted to know what lay beneath the friendly smiles and peaceful words. Now they would find out. On Earth, people gathered in the streets not knowing exactly what was happening, but feeling that something had changed. The air itself seemed different, charged with possibility and dread. In the Situation Room beneath the Rocky Mountains, General Nathan Price stood before a wall of screens, showing military assets that no alien sensor had ever detected, ships, weapons, technologies that had been developed in secret and hidden away for this exact moment. The general looked at his staff with an expression that mixed sorrow with grim determination. God help them, someone whispered. General Price shook his head slowly. God is not the one they need to worry about. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath as humanity prepared to show the galaxy exactly who they really were. 3 days after the massacre at New Haven, the Galactic Concord called an emergency meeting of all member species. The Great Council chamber on the neutral world of Thesha, prime, filled with representatives from 47 spacefaring civilizations. They came in all shapes and sizes. Some were tall and thin with skin like polished metal. Others floated in hovering tanks filled with the liquid their bodies required. A few existed as clouds of light that communicated through color patterns. The galaxy was home to countless forms of intelligent life, and today they had all gathered to discuss what the Vraxians had done. Ambassador Grace Sullivan represented Earth at this meeting. She was a woman in her early 50s with gray-streaked hair and calm brown eyes that revealed nothing of what she was feeling inside. Grace had spent 30 years as a diplomat learning to hide her emotions behind a mask of professional courtesy. Today, that mask was the only thing keeping her from screaming. She took her seat among the delegates and waited. The Vraxian ambassador arrived last. His name was Thaxrol, and he was a massive reptilian creature covered in dark green scales. He walked into the chamber with his head held high and his teeth showing in what passed for a smile among his people. The Vraxians had expected this meeting. They had prepared for condemnation and angry speeches. Perhaps some sanctions or the expulsion of human diplomats from Vraxian space. They had calculated that the soft, weak mammals would cry and complain and eventually accept that they were inferior. Thaxrol was not worried. Humans were pathetic creatures who talked instead of fighting. They would make noise and then slink, a way to lick their wounds. The council moderator was an ancient being from the Marindi Collective, a species of powerful telepaths who had existed for millions of years. She called the session to order and asked if any delegation wished to speak. The Terran Union formally requests the floor. Grace announced. The moderator granted her request, and Grace stood slowly from her seat. Every eye and sensor in the chamber focused on the human woman. Most expected tears or trembling hands. They expected weakness. Grace's hands were perfectly steady. "I have been instructed to deliver a message from Earth's unified government," she said. Her voice was calm and clear. "Before I do, I want the Council to understand something about my species. Something we have chosen not to advertise." The chamber grew very quiet. Even Faxrel leaned forward with curiosity. "Humans are not peaceful by nature," Grace continued. "We are peaceful by choice. Our history is written in blood. We spent thousands of years fighting each other in wars that killed hundreds of millions. We developed weapons capable of destroying our entire planet. We stood at the edge of extinction more than once, because we could not stop killing our own kind." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. This was not what they had expected to hear. When we reached the stars and discovered we were not alone, we made a decision. We decided to be better than our past. We chose to present our best selves to the galaxy. Diplomacy instead of war. Trade instead of conquest. Cultural exchange instead of domination. Grace paused and looked around the chamber. "We chose to be civilized." Reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device which she placed on her podium. 2,300,000 of our people were murdered on New Haven, not soldiers in battle, not casualties of a territorial dispute, families, children, innocent people who wanted nothing more than to live quiet lives under alien suns. They were killed to send a message, to prove that humans could be slaughtered without consequence. Grace activated the device and holographic images filled the air above the assembly. The ruins of New Haven, bodies lying in the streets. Children who would never grow up. The systematic nature of the massacre laid bare for all to see. Many delegates turned away. Some made sounds of distress in their native languages. Even species that had little love for humanity found the images disturbing. Grace turned to face Thaxrel directly. The Vraxian ambassador was no longer smiling. "You wish to see what humans do when pushed too far," Grace said. "You wanted to know our true nature." Her lips curved into a smile that held no warmth or kindness. "Congratulations, Ambassador. You're about to find out." She pressed another button on her device and new images appeared. These showed something very different from the peaceful trading ships and passenger vessels that the galaxy associated with humanity, hidden military bases on Earth's moon. Shipyards buried deep beneath the surface of Mars, weapons research facilities scattered throughout the asteroid belt, and ships. Hundreds upon hundreds of warships that no alien sensor had ever detected. They were sleek and dark and covered with weapons that made even the most advanced alien technology look primitive. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted questions and demands. Some called for immediate sanctions against Earth for hiding such military power. Others simply stared at the images in stunned silence. Thaxrel's scales had gone pale. For the first time in his life he felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. On Earth, things were moving quickly. "Secretary of Defense Lavra?" Mitchell stood in the Situation Room with General Nathan Price and the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Screens covered every wall, showing real-time data from across human-controlled space. "The Vraxians have 17 colony worlds," General Price stated. 800 warships. Approximately 12 billion citizens. He looked at his colleagues. "They believe this makes them invincible," Lavra stepped forward. "What they do not know is that we have been preparing for a moment like this since first contact. Not because we wanted war, because we understood that peace only works when backed by strength." The screens showed shipyard doors opening across the solar system. Vessel after vessel emerged from hidden facilities. Some were small and fast, designed for quick strikes. Others were massive carriers that could deploy thousands of fighters. and at the heart of each fleet were the dreadnoughts. Enormous ships bristling with weapons that could crack planets. Total fleet strength when fully deployed, General Price announced, will be 4,200 vessels, including 37 dreadnought-class carriers. The room was silent as the numbers sank in. The Vraxians had 800 ships and thought themselves mighty. Humanity had been hiding over 4,000. Someone in the back of the room whispered a prayer. General Price looked at the screens showing humanity's true military might finally revealed after decades of secrecy. For 18 years we wore a mask, he said quietly. We smiled and traded and let them think we were weak. We did this because we hoped we would never need to fight. He paused and his expression hardened. They took off our mask when they killed our children. Now they will see what was hiding underneath. Across the galaxy, the news spread like wildfire. The humans were not weak. They had never been weak. They had simply chosen not to show their strength, and now that choice had ended. The Vraxians had wanted to teach humanity a lesson about power and consequence. Instead, they had awakened something ancient and terrible, something that had burned in human hearts since the first ancestor picked up a rock and refused to be prey. The galaxy held its breath and waited to see what would happen next. 6 weeks had passed since the massacre at New Haven, and the galaxy was holding its breath. Every species watched and waited to see what humanity would do next. The Vraxians had retreated to their border worlds and reinforced their defenses. They told themselves that the human fleet was impressive but untested. Numbers meant nothing without experience. The mammals had never fought a real war in space. They would crumble when faced with Vraxian warriors who had conquered dozens of species on the Vraxian border. World of SX-7 military commander. Vraxton sat in his command center watching sensor screens. His world was heavily defended with orbital platforms and ground batteries that could tear apart any invasion force. 300 warships patrolled the space around the planet. Nothing could threaten them here. Then the sensors detected something strange. A ripple in space that should not have been there. Vraxton dismissed it as instrument error. Their technology was superior to anything the humans possessed. There was no way enemy ships could approach without being detected. He was still thinking this when the sky split open. The Terran Second Fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. 200 vessels appeared simultaneously as if they had always been there. Their weapons were already charged and targeting systems were locked onto Vraxian positions. At the head of the fleet was the carrier Retribution commanded by Admiral Patricia Hayes. Patricia was 53 years old with short gray hair and eyes that had seen too much death. She had lost her younger brother on New Haven. He had been a teacher at a small school in the colony's western district. His students had loved him. Now they were all ash scattered across a dead world. Patricia did not let grief cloud her judgment. She channeled it into cold focus. All ships, this is Fleet Admiral Hayes, she announced over the communication system. Execute Operation Harvest Moon. Priority targets are military installations and government facilities only. Civilian infrastructure is to remain untouched unless it houses combatants. I repeat, no civilian targets. The Vraxian Defense Force scrambled to respond. Alarms blared across the planet as ships launched from orbital stations. Commander Vraxton could not believe what he was seeing. The humans had appeared from nowhere and their formation was perfect. Not a single ship out of position. Not a single weapon powered down. He ordered his fleet to attack. They outnumbered the humans 3-1. They had defeated countless enemies before. These soft mammals would learn their place. The battle lasted 47 minutes. Human ships moved with coordination that seemed impossible. Their AI systems predicted Vraxian maneuvers before they happened. Point defense networks created overlapping fields of fire that turned incoming missiles into harmless debris. Fighter squadrons swept through Vraxian formations with surgical precision, striking weapons and engines while leaving crew quarters intact. Commander Vraxton watched his fleet being systematically dismantled. Ship after ship went dark as human weapons disabled their systems. Some vessels tried to retreat but found themselves surrounded. Others attempted desperate ramming attacks, only to be stopped by precise shots that crippled their engines. The Vraxian flagship made one final charge at the Retribution. It was a massive vessel 3 times the size of any human carrier. Commander Vraxton stood on its bridge, screaming orders as his ship accelerated toward the enemy. Admiral Hayes watched the incoming flagship on her tactical display. She felt no hatred for the beings aboard. Only the cold necessity of what had to be done. Main cannon, she ordered. Single shot. Center mast. A beam of light, brighter than a sun, lanced across space. When it faded, the Vraxian flagship was gone. Nothing remained but expanding plasma and tumbling debris. When the battle ended, the SX-7's military capability had been completely destroyed. Every orbital platform was disabled. Every warship was either wrecked or captured. The ground batteries had been neutralized by precision strikes that killed their operators but left the surrounding buildings standing. And not a single civilian had been harmed. Admiral Hayes broadcast on all frequencies. This world is now under Terran protection. Any Vraxian military vessel entering this system will be destroyed without warning. Civilians may continue their daily lives without fear. This is not conquest. This is consequence. Human ground forces established orbital control but made no move to land troops in civilian areas. Instead, they set up aid stations on the outskirts of military zones. They distributed food and medical supplies to anyone who needed them. Engineers began repairing infrastructure that had been damaged in the crossfire. The Vraxians on the SX-7 did not understand. They had been prepared for extermination. Their government had told them that humans were savage beasts who would murder everyone if given the chance. Instead, the mammals were handing out blankets and treating wounded soldiers across the galaxy. Other species watched in amazement. The Marindi Collective immediately withdrew their ambassador from Vraxian space. The Trading Federation suspended all contracts with the Dominion. Even the neutral observers issued a rare, public statement acknowledging that humanity had shown remarkable restraint. On Earth, the reaction was more complicated. Protests erupted in several major cities. Peace movements demanded an end to military action. Signs read, "No more war and violence breeds violence." These people had not lost family on New Haven, they saw only the destruction, and not the justice. President Daniel Carter addressed the nation from his office. His face was lined with exhaustion and his eyes were heavy with the weight of his decisions. "I understand the pain of those who oppose this path," he said. "Believe me when I say that every order I give stays with me. I will carry this weight until my last breath." He paused and held up a photograph. Her name was Emma. She was 7 years old. She lived on New Haven and wanted to be a veterinarian. When she grew up, his voice cracked, but he steadied himself. "I will not let her death mean nothing. I will not let the Vraxians believe they can murder our children and face no response. But I also refuse to become what we are fighting against." His eyes hardened. "We will not target civilians. We will not torture prisoners. We will not burn their cities or slaughter their families. We will win this war without losing our souls." 3 more Vraxian military installations fell within the following month. Each time the pattern repeated. Overwhelming force followed by surgical precision followed by 0 civilian casualties. Human soldiers handed out supplies to the very people whose military they had just destroyed. The Vraxian High Command could not comprehend what was happening. They had expected genocide. They had prepared their population for total war. Instead, they faced something far more terrifying. An enemy that could destroy them completely, but chose not to. An enemy that killed soldiers and healed civilians. An enemy that won battles without hatred and showed mercy without weakness. For the first time in their long history of conquest, the Vraxians began to feel something they had never known before. 4 months had passed since the massacre at New Haven, and the war was not going well for the Vraxian Dominion. They had lost 6 border worlds to human forces. Their mighty fleet had been reduced by half. Every battle ended the same way. Human ships appeared without warning and destroyed everything military while leaving civilians untouched. It was humiliating. It was terrifying. It made no sense. Supreme Commander Zalkith was the highest-ranking military officer in the Dominion. He was old for a Vraxian, with scars covering his face from decades of warfare. He had conquered 12 species in his career. He had never lost a single campaign. Now he watched his empire crumble piece by piece and could not understand why the humans should have been easy prey. They were soft creatures who wrote poetry and made music. They cried when their people died. They hesitated to kill. Everything about them screamed weakness, yet they were winning. Zalkith gathered his remaining commanders in the war room on the Vraxian homeworld. 500 warships were all that remained of their once mighty fleet. It was not enough to defend their borders. It was not enough to launch a proper counterattack. But it might be enough for one desperate strike. We will hit them where it hurts most, Zalkith announced. His voice was rough with age and anger. The human colony of Prometheus Station. 300,000 of their people live there. It is the center of their expansion efforts. One of his officers raised a concern. Supreme Commander, our forces are depleted. If we commit everything to this attack, we leave the homeworld defenseless. Zalkith slammed his fist on the table. The homeworld is already defenseless? We cannot win a war of attrition against enemies who outnumber us 5-1. Our only hope is to force them into a mistake. He pulled up tactical displays, showing Prometheus Station and its defenses. The humans claim to be civilized. They claim to value every life. If we kill enough of their civilians, they will respond with anger instead of calculation. They will attack our cities and slaughter our people. Then the galaxy will see them for the monsters they truly are. Neutral species will turn against them. We will have allies again. The officers exchanged uncertain glances, but none dared to argue. Zalkith was not a leader who tolerated disagreement. 6 hours before the attack was scheduled to begin, Intelligence Officer Christopher Lane detected unusual activity in Vraxian space. He was a young man barely 30 years old who had joined the military after his sister died on New Haven. He spent his days watching sensor data and looking for patterns that others might miss. Something was wrong. Vraxian ships were gathering at a staging point near their homeworld. 500 vessels moving into formation. It was their entire remaining fleet. Christopher ran the calculations 3 times before contacting Admiral Patricia Hayes. She was overseeing reconstruction efforts on one of the liberated border worlds. When his message arrived, "Admiral, they are throwing everything at Prometheus Station," he reported. 500 ships. Every vessel they have left. It is a suicide run. Patricia studied the tactical data on her screen. Her expression did not change, but her mind was racing through possibilities. "They are trying to force our hand," she said quietly. "Kill enough of our civilians and maybe we respond in kind. Burn their cities. Murder their families. Give them the moral justification they need to rally support against us. What do we do, Admiral?" Patricia was silent for a long moment. She thought about her brother who had died on New Haven. She thought about the children in his classroom who would never grow up. She thought about all the reasons she had to hate the Vraxians and all the ways she could make them pay. Then she pushed those thoughts aside. We show them exactly who they are dealing with. The 3rd, 4th, and 5th Terran fleets received emergency orders to converge on Prometheus Station. They arrived 3 hours before the Vraxian assault. Over 700 human warships took up defensive positions around the colony. At the center of the formation was the dreadnought Indomitable, the largest vessel humanity had ever built. Admiral Hayes transferred her flag to this ship and assumed overall command. When the Vraxian fleet emerged from hyperspace, they found themselves facing a wall of weapons. Supreme Commander Zalkith stared at the tactical display in disbelief. His scouts had reported that Prometheus Station was lightly defended. They had said the main human fleets were scattered across Vraxian space. Someone had given him false information. Or perhaps the humans had simply moved faster than anyone thought possible. Admiral Hayes opened a communication channel. Her face appeared on screens across both fleets. Vraxian Fleet, this is Admiral Patricia Hayes of the Terran Navy. You are outnumbered and outgunned. Your attack will fail. I am authorized to offer terms. Zalkith's face twisted with fury. Terms? You slaughter our soldiers and speak of terms? Your soldiers who attacked unarmed colonies, Patricia replied calmly. Your soldiers who laughed while murdering children. Yes, Commander. I offer terms despite what your people have done. We will never surrender to mammals. Patricia nodded slowly as if she had expected this response. Then let me tell you what will happen. In exactly 1 hour your fleet will be destroyed. Not defeated, destroyed. You will die. Your crews will die. Every ship you brought here will be reduced to atoms. She leaned forward and her eyes were hard as stone. But before that hour ends, I am giving you a chance to save your people. Withdraw now. Return to your homeworld. Accept a ceasefire. Face justice for what was done at New Haven. Justice? Zalkith laughed bitterly. You think your primitive courts frighten us? No, Patricia said softly. I think our ships frighten you. I think our restraint frightens you. Because you understand now that we could have done to your worlds what you did to New Haven. We could have burned every city, killed every citizen, erased your species from the galaxy. Her voice dropped lower. And we chose not to. That is what frightens you, Commander. We had the power to become monsters and we refused. The communication ended. ZL single quotes KETH gave the order to attack. The battle lasted 19 minutes. Human vessels moved like an ism. Their coordination was so perfect that Vraxian targeting systems could not track them. Wave after wave of attackers crashed against the Terran defensive line and shattered. Ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light. Escape pods tumbled through the chaos carrying survivors, who would later become prisoners when it was over 312 Vraxian vessels had been destroyed. 188 had surrendered after their weapons were disabled. Not a single shot had reached Prometheus Station. Not a single civilian had been harmed. Supreme Commander Zalkith died when his flagship broke apart under concentrated fire. His last thought was confusion. He still did not understand how mammals could fight like this. On the Vraxian homeworld, the news spread quickly. Their fleet was gone. Their military was broken. The humans could arrive at any moment, and there was nothing to stop them. But the humans did not come to destroy. Instead, they sent a message, offering peace. And on that distant world, a group of senators began to whisper about revolution. The battle at Prometheus Station had broken the Vraxian military, but the war was not yet over. 5 months had passed since the massacre at New Haven, and the Dominion still refused to surrender. Their fleets were gone and their border worlds were occupied, but the government on their homeworld continued to broadcast messages of defiance. They called humanity monsters and beasts. They promised that every Vraxian would fight to the death, rather than submit to mammals, but the people were no longer listening to their leaders. On occupied worlds, Vraxian civilians had experienced something they never expected. Human soldiers did not murder them in their homes. Human ships did not bomb their cities. Instead, the invaders brought food and medicine. They repaired damaged buildings and restored power to communities that had lost electricity during the fighting. They treated wounded Vraxians in field hospitals, alongside their own injured soldiers. Stories spread from world to world, carried by traders and refugees. The humans are not what we were told. They could kill us all, but they choose mercy instead. Our own government lies to us. On the Vraxian homeworld, a senator named Thelvas listened to these stories with growing horror. She was young for a politician, barely 40 years old, with pale green scales and intelligent eyes. She had believed the propaganda about human savagery. She had supported the attack on New Haven because her leaders told her it was necessary to protect their species. Now she understood the truth. Her government had murdered millions of innocent people for no reason except pride and hatred. They had started a war they could not win against an enemy they did not understand. And they were willing to let every Vraxian die rather than admit their mistake. Thelvas began meeting in secret with other senators who shared her doubts. There were more of them than she expected. Many had family on the occupied worlds who sent messages describing human kindness. Others had simply done the math and realized that continued resistance meant extinction. We must act, Thelvas told them during a midnight gathering in her private chambers. The military council will never surrender. They would rather see our entire species destroyed than face justice for their crimes. An older senator, named Krathvalum, shook his head. What you propose is treason. If we fail, we will be executed. If we do nothing, we will die anyway, Thelvas replied. The humans have shown us who they are. They do not want to exterminate us. They want peace and justice. If we give them what they want, our people can survive. The conspiracy grew over the following weeks. Senators recruited military officers who were tired of fighting an unwinnable war. They made contact with human intelligence agents and negotiated terms in secret. The plan was dangerous but simple. Remove the military council from power and offer immediate surrender. On a cold morning 6 months after the massacre at New Haven, the revolution began. Thelvas addressed the Vraxian people through a hijacked broadcast signal. Her face appeared on every screen across the homeworld. Citizens of the Dominion, I speak to you with a heavy heart. Our government has lied to us. They told us humans were savage beasts who wanted to destroy our species. This is false. On every world they have conquered, they have shown mercy to our people. They have fed our hungry and healed our sick. They have treated us with more kindness than our own leaders ever did. She paused, and her voice grew stronger. The attack on the human colony of New Haven was not self-defense. It was murder. 2 million innocent people, including children, were slaughtered for no reason except to prove that we could do it. This crime was committed in our name, and we must answer for it. Across the homeworld, people stopped what they were doing and listened. I am calling on all loyal Vraxians to reject the military council. Thelvas continued. We must choose peace before it is too late. The humans do not want to destroy us. They want justice. If we give them justice, our species can have a future. The military council responded by sending soldiers to arrest Thelvas and her allies. But the soldiers refused to follow orders. They had families too. They had heard the same stories about human mercy. They were tired of dying for leaders who cared nothing for their lives. Within 3 days, the military council was overthrown. Supreme Commander Zalketh was already dead, but 47 other officials responsible for the New Haven massacre were captured and placed in custody. Thelvas became the head of a new civilian government called the Vraxian Reformed Republic. Her first official act was to contact Earth and request peace. Talks. Admiral Patricia Hayes received the news aboard the Indomitable. She had been preparing for a final assault on the Vraxian homeworld. Her ships were in position. Her weapons were ready. One order, and she could end the war in a matter of hours. She gave a different order instead. All fleets stand down. Maintain defensive positions, but do not advance. We have received a surrender offer, and we will honor it. Some of her officers protested. The Vraxians had murdered millions. They deserved to suffer. They deserved to burn. Patricia understood their anger. She felt it herself every time she thought about her brother. But she also understood something more important. If we destroy them now, we become exactly what they accused us of being, she said. We prove that humans are just another species of killers wearing a mask of civilization. Her voice was firm. We did not fight this war for revenge. We fought it for justice. And justice means giving them a chance to make things right. The peace talks began. 1 week later, on the neutral world of Desha Prime, Secretary of Defense Lavra Mitchell led the human delegation. Senator Thelvas led the Vraxian delegation. Representatives from 47 species watched as the two enemies sat across from each other at a simple table. The negotiations lasted 3 days. The terms were harsh but fair. The Vraxian military would be reduced to defensive capabilities only. War reparations would be paid over 50 years. All officials responsible for the New Haven massacre would face trial before an interspecies tribunal. In exchange, humanity would withdraw from occupied worlds and allow the reformed republic to govern itself. On the final day, both delegations signed the Treaty of New Haven. Thelvas looked at Lavra Mitchell with something like wonder in her eyes. "You could have destroyed us completely. Why did you show mercy?" Lavra was quiet for a moment before answering, "Because mercy is not weakness. It is the hardest choice a strong person can make." She paused. "And because we want to build a galaxy where species can live together without fear. That is only possible if we prove that justice does not require cruelty." The war was over, but the work of healing had only just begun.